The grand ceremony hall on Zenthara Prime sparkled with lights from 1,000 floating crystals. Representatives from 5 powerful species stood on the central platform, raising their ceremonial cups toward the ceiling. The Kryn delegation, tall and covered in blue scales, spoke first. High Chancellor Vrex spread his 4 arms wide and announced to the gathered crowd that this marked 800 years of perfect unity across the galaxy. The crowd cheered. Cameras broadcast the celebration to every world under the Galactic Throne's control. Musicians from the Vexari species played instruments that created sounds like falling water. The Thulos representatives, massive beings with rocky skin, stamped their feet in rhythm. Everything looked peaceful and happy. But in the lower levels of Zenthara Prime, in districts the cameras never showed, 12 species lived very different lives. They worked in factories that never closed. They mined resources from dangerous caves. Their children were taken away to special schools that taught them to serve the throne. When anyone complained, ships appeared in the sky above their homes. The message was always clear: obey or die. The throne called these 12 species their partners. They called them client species who benefited from throne protection. But protection from what? The only threat these species ever faced came from the throne itself. On this celebration day, representatives from the 12 client species stood at the back of the ceremony hall. They wore clothes that marked them as lesser. They smiled because they had to smile. They clapped because refusing to clap meant punishment. A young Pelthri female named Sarah stood among them, her gray skin marked with scars from factory work. She was only 16 cycles old, but her hands looked ancient. High Chancellor Vrex continued his speech. He talked about prosperity and cooperation. He talked about how the throne brought civilization to primitive worlds. The 5 ruling species nodded and agreed. No one mentioned the mass graves on Pelthri Prime from the rebellion that was not really a rebellion. No one talked about the Korthan children who vanished into cultural exchange programs and never returned. Sarah listened and felt sick. She wondered if anyone in the galaxy knew the truth. She wondered if anyone cared. High above the planet, in the darkness of space, sensors suddenly screamed warnings. The throne's flagship, a massive vessel called the Eternal Crown, detected something impossible. Energy readings appeared from nowhere. Something enormous had just revealed itself. Admiral Thex, a Vexari commander with silver skin and sharp teeth, stared at his display screen. The readings made no sense. According to the data, something had been in orbit for months. Something had been watching them, hidden behind technology the throne did not recognize. The object was huge, bigger than the Eternal Crown, bigger than any ship the throne had ever built. Down in the ceremony hall, alarms began ringing. The music stopped. High Chancellor Vrex received an urgent message through his personal communicator. His blue scales turned pale. Suddenly, every screen in the ceremony hall changed. The images of celebration vanished. Instead, people saw space. They saw their own planet from orbit, and they saw a ship. The vessel looked like nothing in throne records. It had smooth gray metal that seemed to drink in light. Strange symbols marked its hull in a language no one recognized. The ship stretched for kilometers, bristling with technology that the throne's best scientists could not identify. Then the ship's hull began to glow. Massive screens appeared along its side, screens so large that people on the planet's surface could see them with their bare eyes. The screens began showing images. Sarah gasped. Others around her made sounds of shock and horror and painful recognition. The screens showed the truth. They showed Kryn soldiers burning Pelthri villages. They showed Vexari administrators separating Korthan children from their parents. They showed forced labor camps on 6 different worlds. They showed executions disguised as accidents. They showed 800 years of lies. High Chancellor Vrex shouted orders to cut the transmission. But the humans, whoever they were, had taken control of every communication system. Every screen on every world under throne control showed the same images. Billions of beings watched evidence they could not deny. A voice came from the mysterious ship. It spoke in perfect galactic common, but with an accent no one had heard before. The voice belonged to a female, calm and clear. "We are the crew of the human vessel Sentinel's Promise. For 6 months we have watched you. We have recorded everything. We have seen what you do to those who cannot defend themselves." High Chancellor Vrex found his voice. He demanded to know what the humans wanted. He declared that they had no authority in throne space. He threatened them with the full might of the Galactic Throne's military forces. The voice from the ship replied without anger or fear. "We do not seek authority over you. We do not want your territory or your resources. We came to do one thing only. We came to witness. And now, we have shown everyone else what we witnessed." The screens on the ship's hull continued their display. More images appeared. Medical experiments on unwilling subjects. Starvation used as punishment for entire populations. Historical records that proved the throne had lied about nearly everything for centuries. Sarah stood in the ceremony hall with tears running down her face. But they were not tears of sadness. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had almost forgotten. She felt hope. Around the galaxy, on 12 oppressed worlds, beings watched the same images. They saw proof that their suffering was real, that their pain mattered, that someone had noticed. The human voice spoke again. "We have seen everything. Now, so has everyone else. What happens next is your choice." The Sentinel's promise hung in space, silent and massive and undeniable. Inside the ceremony hall, the celebration was over. High Chancellor Vrex stared at the screens with growing horror. He realized that in one moment, with one act of revelation, the humans had done something no military force had ever accomplished. They had broken the throne's greatest weapon. They had destroyed the lie. Captain Min Jun Park stood on the bridge of the Sentinel's Promise and watched her crew work. Every station buzzed with quiet activity. Communication Officer Hana Choi sat at her console, managing data streams from across the galaxy. The humans had done something bold, and now they waited to see how the throne would respond. Min Jun knew this moment would come. She had prepared for it during 6 months of silent observation. 6 months of watching atrocities and recording every detail. 6 months of her crew asking when they could act, and her telling them to wait. Patience was not easy when you witnessed evil, but Min Jun understood that evidence needed to be complete and undeniable. Now the evidence was everywhere. Every civilized world in the galaxy had access to it. The throne could not simply make it disappear. Hana turned from her station. "Captain, we are receiving thousands of transmissions from the throne, from client species, from independent civilizations. Everyone wants to talk to us." Min Jun nodded. "Open a channel to the Galactic Throne first. Let them speak." The main view screen activated. High Chancellor Vrex appeared, his blue scales darker than before, almost purple with rage. Behind him stood representatives from the other 4 throne species. They all looked furious. "You have committed an act of war," Vrex said, his voice shaking. "You have invaded our space, violated our sovereignty, and spread lies designed to destabilize our government. We demand you surrender your vessel immediately." Min Jun kept her face calm. She had expected this response. Those in power always called truth a lie when truth threatened them. "High Chancellor, we have invaded nothing. We observed from international space using sensor technology that harmed no one. As for lies, everything we broadcast came from your own security recordings and official communications. We simply compiled what you yourselves documented." A Vexari admiral stepped forward on the screen. You fabricated this evidence. You use technology to create false images. You seek to conquer our territory by turning our allies against us. Min Jun glanced at Hana, who pressed several buttons. We anticipated you would claim fabrication. We are now transmitting our complete sensor logs with quantum timestamps. Your own scientists will confirm these cannot be forged. Every image, every recording, every piece of evidence includes metadata that proves when and where it was captured. You are welcome to verify everything. The throne representatives went silent. Quantum timestamps were impossible to fake with known technology. If the humans were willing to share that data, they were confident it would withstand any examination. A Thulos representative, smaller than the others and with lighter stone-colored skin, spoke quietly. What do you want? Conquest? Territory? Resources? Name your price for silence. This question hurt Min Jun more than the accusations of war. The throne could not imagine someone acting without selfish motivation. They could not conceive of beings who helped others without demanding payment. We want nothing from you, Min Jun said. We are not here to conquer. We are not here to rule. We are here to witness, and we have shown the galaxy what we witnessed. What happens next is not our decision. It belongs to all the species you have harmed. She nodded to Hana again. The communication officer opened channels to all 12 client species homeworlds simultaneously. The view screen split into sections, showing representatives from each oppressed civilization. Many had tears on their faces. Some looked shocked. All looked grateful. Min Jun addressed them directly. For 6 months, we watched your suffering. We documented crimes committed against you. We have now given you something the throne took from you long ago. We have given you proof that your pain is real, that your complaints are justified, that you deserve better. The galaxy now knows the truth. What you choose to do with that truth is your decision, not ours. A Peltry elder appeared in one screen section. Her gray skin bore many scars. Why did you help us? You do not know us. We have nothing to offer you. Min Jun smiled gently. Where we come from, we have a saying. We believe that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We help because it is right, not because it benefits us. We believe no species should suffer simply because they lack the power to defend themselves. Vrex interrupted, his voice desperate now. You cannot seriously expect the entire galactic order to change because of your interference. We have maintained peace for 800 years. You maintained control, Min Jun corrected. Peace and control are not the same thing. Peace built on suffering is not peace at all. It is simply delayed violence. She took a breath and prepared to deliver the ultimatum she had discussed with Earth Command for weeks before this mission began. High Chancellor, we are giving you and the throne 72 hours. In that time, you will begin dismantling the systems that exploit these 12 species. You will release all hostages taken in your cultural exchange programs. You will withdraw your garrison forces from client worlds. You will begin negotiations for fair representation in your government. Vrex laughed, a harsh sound. And if we refuse? Then we continue broadcasting, Min Jun said simply. We have 17 more vessels positioned throughout this region of space. Each one carries copies of all evidence. Each one has the capacity to transmit continuously for years. Every civilization in known space will have constant access to the truth about the galactic throne. You will become known not as protectors or leaders, but as oppressors. History will remember you not for your 800 years of unity, but for your 800 years of cruelty. The threat was not military. The humans offered no violence. But Min Jun saw fear in Vrex's eyes anyway. The throne's power rested on reputation and legitimacy. The humans threatened to destroy both. A new face appeared on the view screen, pushing past the others. She belonged to a Silketh, a species with pale skin that seemed to glow softly. She wore the robes of a throne ambassador, but her expression held no anger. "Captain Park," the Silketh woman said, "my name is Lyra. I speak only for myself, not for the throne. I wonder if you would accept a private communication. There are things I wish to discuss." Min Jun studied the ambassador's face. She saw no deception there, only exhaustion and something that looked like relief. "I will accept your communication, Ambassador Lyra. Transmit your secure frequency." Vreck started to object, but Lyra had already cut her connection. The High Chancellor glared at Min Jun. 72 hours changes nothing. We will not surrender to terrorists." "We are not asking you to surrender," Min Jun replied. "We are asking you to do what is right. The choice is yours, High Chancellor. Choose wisely." She signaled Hana to end the transmission. The view screen went dark. Around the bridge, her crew waited for orders. Min Jun sat in her command chair and considered the next moves. 72 hours would determine everything. In that time, the throne would either begin real change or commit to defending their crimes. Either way, the galaxy had been warned. Justice, however delayed, was finally coming. The private communication from Ambassador Lyra came through 12 hours after the public confrontation. Min Jun took it in her ready room, a small office adjacent to the bridge. The Silketh woman appeared on the screen, and Min Jun noticed immediately that she looked tired, in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "Thank you for accepting this call, Captain Park," Lyra said. "I needed to speak with you away from throne monitoring. What I am about to tell you could be considered treason." Min Jun leaned forward. "I am listening, Ambassador." Lyra closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with visible determination. "Everything you broadcast is true. I have known about the atrocities for 40 years. I have opposed them quietly, arguing for reform in private meetings, trying to change policies from within the system. But I was always afraid that speaking publicly would accomplish nothing except my own removal from power, afraid that I alone could not make a difference." "You were not wrong to be afraid," Min Jun said gently. "One voice against an entire system faces impossible odds." "But you changed that," Lyra continued. "You gave me something I did not have before. You gave me evidence that cannot be ignored and allies who might support reform." "Captain, I am not alone in my doubts. There are others within the throne who have questioned our methods. 2 other species have representatives who secretly oppose what we have become." This was important information. Min Jun kept her expression neutral. "Can you tell me who?" "The Thulos representative you saw briefly on your call. Her name is Mordra. She has a daughter who was born with a deformity according to throne standards. Under our laws, such children are removed for correction. Mordra had to hide her daughter on a client world to keep her safe. She understands what it means to be powerless under unjust laws." Lyra paused, then continued. "The second is a Mordane named Kelrax. His species joined the throne 300 years ago. He has access to historical records that show how the throne manipulated his ancestors into accepting client status. His people were never meant to rule, they were meant to serve. He has carried that knowledge and shame for decades." Min Jun processed this carefully. 3 of the 5 throne species had members willing to support change. That created possibilities. "What are you proposing, Ambassador?" "A meeting," Lyra said. "Allow myself, Mordra, and Kelrax to come aboard your vessel. We can discuss a path forward that does not require the complete destruction of the galactic throne. Reform instead of revolution. Change instead of chaos." It could be a trap. Min Jun knew that, but her instincts, developed over 20 years of diplomatic service, told her Lyra was sincere. Sometimes you had to take calculated risks. "I will allow this meeting. But, Ambassador, understand that we will not compromise on the core issues. The client species must receive justice." "I would not ask you to compromise," Lyra replied. I am asking you to help us find a way to deliver that justice without plunging the galaxy into war. The meeting took place 18 hours later. Lyra arrived with Mordra and Kelrax in a small diplomatic shuttle. Min-Jun met them in the Sentinel's Promise Conference room, accompanied by her first officer, Hana Choi, and cultural liaison, Lieutenant Jin-Woo Song. Mordra was even larger in person than on screen, her rocky skin showing cracks that indicated advanced age. Kelrax had dark purple fur and multiple eyes that seemed to see everything at once. All three visitors looked nervous, but determined. Jin-Woo offered them refreshments, a human gesture of hospitality. They accepted gratefully. Min-Jun waited until everyone was seated before speaking. Thank you for coming. I know this required courage. Courage we should have found decades ago, Mordra said, her voice rumbling like distant thunder. We allowed fear to keep us silent while innocents suffered. That is a shame we will carry forever. The past cannot be changed, Min-Jun replied, but the future can be shaped. Tell me, what support do you have among the other throne species? Kelrax spread his hands. Among the Silketh, perhaps 30% of government officials would support reform. Among the Thulos, maybe 20%. Among the Mordain, I believe half would join us if they felt it was safe to do so. The Kryn and Vexari are the problem. Their leadership is committed to maintaining the current system. Then we separate them, Hana suggested. Not through military force, but through choice. We offer the path forward to those willing to take it. Those who refuse face the consequences of their refusal. Lyra nodded eagerly. Exactly. If three throne species publicly support reform and the client species see that we are sincere, then the Kryn and Vexari become isolated. They can either join the reform movement or stand against it alone. Jin-Woo had been quiet, studying the three visitors. Now he spoke, his voice thoughtful. But the client species must lead this process. Any reform imposed by throne members, even well-meaning ones, will look like another form of control. They need to determine their own futures. This was why Min-Jun valued Jin-Woo. He understood the deeper principles at work. She turned to their visitors. Our lieutenant is correct. We can facilitate discussions. We can provide evidence and support. But we cannot dictate outcomes. The 12 oppressed species must have equal voices in whatever comes next. Mordra's expression showed surprise. You truly do not seek to rule us? We truly do not, Min-Jun confirmed. Where we come from, we learned hard lessons about imposing our will on others. We learned that real change must come from within, not from external force. We can show you a better path, but you must choose to walk it yourselves. The meeting continued for hours. They discussed practical steps, public announcements from the reformist throne members, the creation of a neutral negotiation space, the involvement of independent civilizations as witnesses and mediators. They talked about reparations, about returning hostages, about dismantling the structures of oppression. As the discussions progressed, Min-Jun felt cautiously optimistic. This might actually work. Reform would be slow and difficult, but it was possible. Then the alarms sounded. Hana's communicator activated. The bridge officer's voice came through urgent and clear. Captain, sensors detect multiple vessels approaching at high speed. Warships, Kryn signatures. They are powering weapons. Min-Jun stood immediately. How many? 12 vessels, Captain, heading directly for our position. Lyra's face went pale. They are going to try to destroy your ship. If you are gone, the evidence can be denied or controlled. Min-Jun smiled, not a happy expression, but one of grim satisfaction. Then it is fortunate we anticipated exactly this response. Lieutenant Song, please escort our guests to the secondary bridge where they will be safe. Commander Choi, with me. As they moved toward the bridge, Hana asked quietly, The decoy? The decoy, Minjun confirmed. Let us hope our paranoia was justified. On the bridge, the crew worked with practiced efficiency. The tactical officer displayed the approaching Kryn vessels on screen. They would be in weapons range in 4 minutes. Minjun opened a channel to all hands. This is the captain. We have hostiles approaching. Execute protocol vanishing act on my mark. All personnel to evacuation stations. She watched the timer count down. 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. Mark, the Sentinel's promise, the massive battleship that had hung in space for hours, simply vanished. Not destroyed, but gone as if it had never existed. The Kryn warships arrived at empty space. They fired their weapons at nothing. Their sensors found no debris, no energy signatures, no evidence of a ship at all. Because there had never been a ship in that exact position. The real Sentinel's promise had moved to a different orbital path hours ago. What the Kryn attacked was an extremely sophisticated holographic projection, one designed to fool sensors and appear completely real until the moment it was no longer needed. From her actual position, 200,000 kilometers away, Minjun broadcast on all frequencies. High Chancellor Vrex, your assassination attempt has failed. More importantly, you have now demonstrated to the entire galaxy that you prefer violence to dialogue. 47 independent civilizations received copies of our evidence the moment you launched those ships. You cannot kill the truth, High Chancellor. You can only choose whether to be remembered as those who upheld it or those who died fighting it. In his command center on Xanthara Prime, Vrex stared at his screens in disbelief. The humans had predicted his attack. They had prepared for it. They had used it against him. He realized with cold certainty that he was dealing with an opponent far more dangerous than any military force. He was fighting people who understood that real power came not from weapons, but from moral authority. And he was losing. The failed assassination attempt changed everything. Within 6 hours, Ambassador Lyra made a public broadcast from aboard the Sentinel's Promise. She stood tall and spoke clearly, her glowing skin visible to billions of viewers across the galaxy. I am Lyra of the Silkith delegation to the Galactic Throne. For 40 years I have served that government. Today, I can no longer do so in good conscience. The evidence presented by the humans is accurate and true. I have witnessed these atrocities myself and remained silent out of fear. That silence ends now. I formally call for the immediate restructuring of the Galactic Throne to include equal representation for all species, the release of all hostages, and full reparations for crimes committed against client populations. Within the hour, Mordra of the Thulos made a similar statement. Then Kelrax of the Mordain. 3 of the 5 ruling species had publicly broken with the throne's leadership. On Xanthara Prime, High Chancellor Vrex watched his government fracture in real time. He called an emergency meeting of the remaining throne leadership. Only the Kryn and Vexari representatives attended. The others had abandoned him. Admiral Thex of the Vexari spoke first. We must mobilize the full fleet. We crush the humans, execute the traitors, and restore order by force. But even as he said it, Thex knew the plan would fail. The humans had demonstrated technological superiority. More importantly, they had won the battle for public opinion. Any attack now would only prove the humans' accusations correct. Vrex slumped in his chair. How did we lose control so quickly? We ruled for 800 years. We ruled through fear and lies, said a voice from the doorway. A young Kryn officer named Kelrath entered without permission, followed by a dozen others. And when someone finally exposed those lies, our power evaporated like morning fog. Vrex stood angrily. You dare interrupt a command meeting? I dare much more than that, Kelrath replied calmly. He gestured to the officers behind him. We represent the junior command structure of the Kryn fleet. We have discussed your plans to attack the humans. We have read the evidence they provided. We have concluded that you have brought shame upon our entire species. Thex reached for his weapon, but 3 junior officers already had their own weapons drawn and pointed at him. The Vexari admiral froze. Kelrath approached Vrex directly. High Chancellor, you have 2 choices. You can come with us peacefully to the negotiations the humans have offered, or we will deliver you in restraints. Either way, you are done giving orders that result in the deaths of innocents. Vrex stared at the young officer. He saw determination there, but also pain. These were not rebels seeking power. They were soldiers who could no longer follow immoral commands. Why? Vrex asked quietly. Why betray your own kind? We are not betraying our kind, Kelrath said. We are trying to save them. Every moment we continue these policies, we add to a debt our species will spend generations repaying. Better to stop now and begin making amends than to die defending the indefensible. 20 minutes later, Kelrath transmitted a message to the Sentinel's promise. Captain Park, this is Officer Kelrath of the Kryn Fleet. I am delivering High Chancellor Vrex and Admiral Thex to the negotiation site you proposed. They have agreed to participate in reform discussions. We request that you accept this as the Kryn species' commitment to change. On the Sentinel's promise, Minjun watched the transmission with Hana and Jin Wu. None of them had expected this development. They had prepared for war, for resistance, for long struggles. They had not prepared for the throne to collapse from within. How should we respond? Hana asked. Minjun thought carefully. This was a delicate moment. We accept their offer, but we make clear that Kelrath and his fellow officers do not speak for all Kryn. The negotiations must include voices from every level of throne society and every client species. This is not about changing leaders. This is about changing systems. She opened a return channel. Officer Kelrath, we accept your offer and recognize the courage required to make it. We are establishing a neutral negotiation site on the planet Havron 7, an independent world that has agreed to host these discussions. All 17 species involved in this matter will send representatives. The humans will facilitate but will not dictate terms. Bring your former leaders. They will have the opportunity to participate in building something better than what they destroyed. Across throne space, the 12 client species watched these developments with amazement and hope. On Pel3 Prime, young Sarah gathered with others in her community. They listened to broadcasts describing the upcoming negotiations. An elder named Davron spoke to the assembly. The humans have given us an opportunity our ancestors could only dream of, but opportunity is not the same as outcome. We must choose our representatives carefully. We must know what we want and be willing to fight for it through words and persistence. Sarah raised her hand. What if they try to trick us again? What if this is just another way to control us? Davron nodded. That is a fair concern. But notice what the humans have done. They did not come as saviors demanding gratitude. They came as witnesses showing truth. They do not offer to protect us. They offer to stand beside us while we protect ourselves. That is not the language of conquerors. On the other 11 client worlds, similar conversations took place. Representatives were chosen, not from the traditional leaders who had learned to serve the throne, but from those who had resisted, who had kept hope alive, who understood what freedom meant. The neutral world of Havron 7 prepared for an unprecedented gathering. 17 species, 5 former rulers, and 12 former subjects would meet to negotiate a new future. Human engineers helped construct a facility designed for exactly this purpose. A circular conference hall with 17 equal seats. No head of the table. No positions of superiority. Minjun arrived 3 days before negotiations began. She walked the conference hall and felt both hope and worry. Hope, because this moment was possible. Worry, because it could still fail. Jin Wu joined her in the empty hall. Are you concerned, Captain? Of course, Minjun replied. "We have brought them to the table, but we cannot make them reach agreement. We cannot force them to build something fair and lasting. That work belongs to them alone." "Do you think they will succeed?" Minjun looked at the 17 empty seats. "I think they have something they did not have before. They have truth. They have witnesses. They have the knowledge that the entire galaxy is watching. Sometimes that is enough." 2 days before negotiations began, the 17 human ships that had been positioned throughout throne space moved into orbit around Havron 7. They did not position themselves for attack. Instead, they spread out in a protective formation around the planet. Minjun broadcast a message to all participants. "These vessels will remain here during your negotiations. We do not control you. We do not threaten you. We simply ensure that no outside force can interrupt what you are about to attempt. Inside that conference hall, you are free to argue, to disagree, to work through centuries of pain and anger. But you will do so without fear of violence. That much we can guarantee." On the night before negotiations began, Minjun stood in her quarters looking at Earth on a display screen. Her home world was far away, weeks of travel even at faster-than-light speeds. She thought about the people there who had sent her on this mission. Earth had learned hard lessons about oppression and resistance. Humanity had been both victim and victimizer throughout its history. Those painful experiences taught humans to recognize injustice even when it wore the mask of order and stability. Her communicator chimed. It was Lyra. "Captain Park, I wanted to thank you before tomorrow begins. Whatever happens in those negotiations, you have given us a chance we did not have before." "Thank you is premature, Ambassador," Minjun said. "The hard work begins tomorrow." "I know," Lyra replied, "but I have hope. For the first time in 40 years, I have real hope. That is worth acknowledging." After the call ended, Minjun allowed herself a small smile. Hope was contagious. It spread from person to person, species to species. The humans had brought evidence and truth, but perhaps their real gift was simply showing others that change was possible. Tomorrow would determine whether possibility became reality. 17 species would sit at one table as equals. They would argue and negotiate and struggle to find common ground. It would be difficult and frustrating and sometimes painful, but it would be a beginning. And sometimes, Minjun thought, a beginning was the most revolutionary thing you could create. The negotiations lasted 37 days. Inside the conference hall on Havron 7, 17 species argued, shouted, wept, and slowly, painfully, built something new. Minjun attended every session, sitting in an observer's chair against the wall. She spoke only when asked direct questions. The rest of the time, she listened and watched. The first week was the hardest. Representatives from the client species brought centuries of anger with them. They described atrocities in detail, naming victims, showing scars. The former throne species listened, many hearing these stories for the first time. Some wept. Others sat in stunned silence. A few tried to defend past actions and were shouted down not by client species, but by their own people. Kelrath of the Kryn stood during one particularly difficult session. "My predecessor authorized the burning of Pelthry agricultural centers 20 years ago. The official report called it a necessary police action. I have now read the actual casualty reports. 3,000 civilians died, mostly children and elderly who could not flee fast enough. I cannot undo this crime. I can only acknowledge it and promise it will never happen again under my watch." Sarah, chosen as one of the Pelthry representatives despite her young age, responded. "Your promise means nothing by itself. Promises have been made before and broken. We need more than words. We need actions and safeguards and consequences for those who violate agreements." This became the pattern. Client species demanded concrete protections. Former throne species had to accept that words alone could not rebuild trust. The discussions moved from emotional testimonies to practical frameworks. Jin Wu, serving as one of the human facilitators, helped guide these conversations. He introduced concepts from Earth's own troubled history. He talked about truth and reconciliation processes. He discussed how societies recovered from systematic oppression. He offered examples without demanding they be followed. During the second week, they tackled representation. The old throne had 5 ruling species making all decisions. The client species wanted equal voices, but that created practical problems. How did you govern 17 different civilizations with 17 different priorities? Mordra proposed a solution. We create a galactic assembly where each species has one vote on matters affecting all. But we also establish regional councils where species can govern themselves on internal matters. No species rules another. No species imposes its values on others. The debate over this proposal lasted 3 days. Eventually, with modifications suggested by multiple participants, it passed with support from all 17 delegations. The hardest topic came in week 3, reparations. The client species had been exploited for centuries. They deserved compensation. But what form should that take? How much was appropriate? How could the former throne species provide reparations without crippling their own populations? Here, Min Jun broke her usual silence. If I may offer a thought, she said carefully, reparations should focus on building the future rather than punishing the past. Resources to develop client worlds, technology transfers, educational exchanges, help them build strong, independent civilizations rather than simply transferring wealth. A Vexari representative named Sorix, who had replaced the discredited Admiral Thex, nodded slowly. The humans make a wise suggestion. We have technology the client species lack. Medical advances, agricultural techniques, infrastructure development knowledge, these have real value and cost us less than massive wealth transfers. Sarah stood. But technology can be taken back or sabotaged. We need guarantees. Then we create a joint commission, Lyra suggested. Humans serve as neutral observers. They verify that technology transfers are complete and genuine. They monitor implementation. If any former throne species tries to undermine the process, the humans expose it to the galaxy. Min Jun hesitated. That creates an ongoing dependency on humanity. We prefer not to establish ourselves as permanent overseers. Not permanent, Kelrath said. Temporary. 10 years. 20 at most. Long enough to establish trust and new patterns. Then we manage ourselves. After much discussion, this framework was accepted. The humans would serve as neutral monitors for 15 years. After that, an independent body made up of all 17 species would take over. Week 4 brought a surprise proposal from an unexpected source. Vrex, the former High Chancellor, requested permission to speak. He had been silent through most negotiations, sitting in the Kryn delegation area looking diminished and tired. I have listened to these discussions, Vrex said, his voice lacking its former arrogance. I have heard the pain my policies caused. I want to propose something that will likely seem inadequate, but it is all I can offer. I request that the new Galactic Assembly establish a historical commission. Let them document everything. The crimes, the victims, the perpetrators. Let future generations know exactly what happened and who was responsible. I will testify honestly. I will name names. I will hold myself accountable even though I cannot undo the harm I caused. The room went silent. Sarah looked at the former High Chancellor with an expression Min Jun could not quite read. Why would you do this? It only increases your shame. Because shame is what I deserve, Vrex replied, and because perhaps if future leaders know they will be remembered and judged, they will make better choices than I did. The Historical Commission was approved unanimously. By week 5, the major frameworks were in place. but implementation details took another 2 weeks to negotiate. Every clause was argued over. Every word mattered because words would become laws that governed billions of beings. Finally, on day 37, the Galactic Assembly Accords were complete. All 17 delegations signed. The document established equal representation, regional autonomy, reparations frameworks, historical documentation requirements, and protection mechanisms for species rights. Min-jun stood before the assembled delegations for the final time. You have accomplished something remarkable. You have transformed pain into progress. You have chosen cooperation over revenge. Now comes the truly difficult part. You must take these agreements home and convince your populations to support them. You must implement changes that will take years or decades to complete. You must build trust when trust has been shattered. She paused, then continued. The humans came to witness and to show you truth. We have done that. Now we will keep our promise. We will leave throne space, which will soon be known as assembly space. We will not rule you. We will not replace one set of masters with another. Lyra stood quickly. But you agreed to monitor the technology transfers and reparations. We will send observers for that specific purpose, Min-jun confirmed. But the 17 ships currently in orbit will depart. We came to show you that you could protect yourselves. We leave so that you can prove it. Sarah stood as well, tears on her gray face. What if we fail? What if old patterns return? Then you will deal with it as free beings making your own choices, Min-jun said gently. Freedom means you can succeed. It also means you can fail. We trust you to build something good, but we will not deny you the dignity of responsibility for your own future. 3 days later, the human ships prepared to depart. Only Dr. Soo-min Kim remained behind as humanity's official ambassador to the new Galactic Assembly. The young medical officer stood on Havron 7 watching the Sentinel's promise prepare for departure. Min-jun had offered Soo-min a choice, return to Earth or stay as humanity's representative. Soo-min chose to stay. They will need help, she said. Not control or direction, just help. Someone who understands what you were trying to accomplish. On the bridge of the Sentinel's promise, Min-jun gave the order to break orbit. Around Havron 7, 17 human vessels began their journey back toward Earth. They would travel together for a while, then split off toward different duties in different regions of space. Hana stood beside Min-jun's command chair. Do you think they will succeed, Captain? Do you think the assembly will last? I think they have a better chance than they had a month ago, Min-jun replied. We gave them truth and opportunity. What they build with those tools is up to them. The Sentinel's promise jumped to faster-than-light travel. As the stars stretched into lines of light, Min-jun thought about what they had accomplished. They had not conquered. They had not ruled. They had simply witnessed and shown others what they had witnessed. Sometimes that was enough. 5 years passed. The Galactic Assembly struggled through its early period. There were setbacks and arguments and moments when the whole experiment seemed ready to collapse. But it held together. The client species, now equal partners, learned to negotiate and compromise. The former throne species learned humility and restraint. Reparations flowed. Technology transferred. Historical commissions documented atrocities and honored victims. Slowly, trust began to rebuild. Then a message reached Earth. It came from the Galactic Assembly, signed by all 17 member species. They had discovered another civilization in a distant sector. This civilization exploited primitive species on neighboring worlds. The Assembly requested human assistance. We do not ask you to conquer them, the message read. We do not ask you to rule them. We ask you to do what you did for us. Come and witness. Show the galaxy the truth. Help us give the oppressed the opportunity to free themselves. Min Jun, now promoted to admiral and commanding a small fleet of observer vessels, read the message aboard the Sentinel's promise. 5 years had changed the ship very little. It still carried the most advanced sensors humanity could build. It still had the capacity to gather evidence that could not be denied. She called her senior staff to the bridge. Hana, still her first officer. Jin Woo, now chief diplomatic liaison. A dozen others who had been with her during the throne mission. "It seems our work is not finished," Min Jun said. "The Assembly has learned from what we showed them. Now they want to help others learn the same lessons. They ask us to be what we were always meant to be." "And what is that?" Hana asked, though she already knew the answer. Min Jun smiled. "Witnesses. Guardians in the darkness. The ones who watch and remember and ensure that those without power are never again ignored. We are not warriors. We are not rulers. We are the conscience of the galaxy, reminding everyone that justice, however delayed, will always come." The Sentinel's promise turned toward the distant sector. Behind it, other human observer ships prepared for similar missions. Humanity had found its role among the stars. Not as conquerors or saviors, but as those who saw and remembered and gave voice to the voiceless. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying with it a simple truth that had changed one civilization and would change others. Someone is always watching, and the truth, once revealed, cannot be hidden again.